My name is Stefano Nicoletti. I work in GSMA. I am Policy Director for IoT. And I would like to talk to you about our activities in IoT. My colleague Janina has already introduced our association. We represent basically all mobile operators in the world, 800 members, 300 vendors and operators from the wider ecosystem. And we have been working in the IoT space for many, many years. So the program is aimed at, we say, mobilizing the Internet of Things. And this year we are focusing on three main pillars to do so. Firstly, we are looking into the mobile IoT program, which is basically connectivity. How to promote commercially licensed LPWA, low power wide area connections on existing spectrum. Secondly, big data, and we have already talked about big data in the previous session. Thirdly, security or cybersecurity. And today I will focus mainly on the first and the third, but before that I will give you a bit of an indication of what the market looks like from our perspective. It's a global perspective, and these are estimates from our intelligence department. They look at the total IoT connections from now, or actually better, from 2016 to 2025. You can see that there is an expectation of 25 billion connected devices. Against that, the actual cellular connection is only, in inverted comma, 3.1 billion, out of which 1.2 billion traditional cellular connectivity, 2G, 3G, 4G, and 1.9 billion low power wide area. Low power wide area on cellular network wasn't possible before 2017. So we expect this to be playing a very, very important role in this market. The other consideration that comes out from this slide is that although the market is very wide, the role of our, let's say, we as connectivity player, we have a relatively small market, if you want, in the sense of 3 billion out of 25. Numbers are very important to inform policies, so it's important to look at them very carefully. I've taken out from the presentation details on how connectivity should be looked at, because we may not have at the time, but I'm happy to, to talk about it later, if you want. I think the other key point that comes out from these numbers is that the real business opportunity is outside connectivity. We, as a mobile industry, are connecting already in the range of 7 billion people for voice and data. So these numbers, consideration also that IoT is a relatively less rentable market for each single connectivity, means that the business opportunity for us is outside connectivity. And when we are looking at the breakdown for this number by region, we see that the key leaders are Asia Pacific, North America, Europe, with Latin America following, but with the risk of missing the opportunity, and with the risk that this gap is going to be increased from now to 2025. So we believe that government should intervene in this space now to make sure that this gap is not going to be widened over time. We know that Brazil has already established a plan for IoT. We think that it's important that this plan comes real and gets implemented as soon as possible. We have here I decided that I would bring some examples of what IoT on traditional cellular connectivity is today. And then we will look at mobile IoT and security. A couple of examples, 3 examples actually. One from Far East. This is Taiwan. Tainan is the cultural capital of the island and is exposed to flood risk. So one of our key members, Far Easton, is working with the local authorities to provide real-time monitoring of the infrastructure, the pumps and the rivers, to avoid and basically control the risk of flood. And this is done through a 4G connection and enables a better disaster response. Disaster response is a key area where IoT can really provide an important value for society. Another example, another operator, this is still from the Asia Pacific region, Singapore. We have discussed in the previous session something very similar. StarHub, what they do, they use anonymized, and it's important to stress, anonymized mobile location data. They aggregate them, they analyze, and they offer analytics to the city managers so that they can better plan infrastructure and public services. We have heard the similar example from TIM and Telefonica here in Brazil, so I'm not saying anything particularly new on this. Third example that I wanted to bring to you today, again with the current technologies. This is from the US, and I think there is a message behind that. This is AT&T in combination with General Electric. They use a specific platform that General Electric is doing in the area of IoT, and the idea is to offer a street lighting service. So basically convert the current lighting into smart lighting. But I think the key point here is that when you offer this type of service, you should use this as an opportunity to create a new platform. Look at how much stuff you can fit into a lighting pole today. It's not just a bulb. It's a camera, it's a microphone, it's an environmental sensor, a Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. So you're actually creating a platform to deliver a number of additional services, monitoring pollution, in fact in the US monitoring gunshots, monitoring traffic, etc. I think the key point here, the message for policymakers at city level, is that when you launch a smart city service, you should do that in such a way that you create a platform to then add other services on top, not just one, but many services. I thought the good way of saying in this example is thinking beyond the bulb. But that's the current services. Looking at the future, or actually the future is already here in many circumstances, but mobile IoT, what do I mean with this expression? I specifically refer to 2 technologies, NB-IoT and LTM, here on the right-hand side of this slide. These are technologies that enable licensed low-power wide area over existing spectrum. So basically, our members can offer, on top of voice and data services, IoT connectivity using the same infrastructure, the same frequencies. Obviously, networks need to be appropriately upgraded, but the, let's say, marginal cost of doing so is relatively limited. So what are we saying here? We're actually offering to the market a solution that may be seen in competition with unlicensed low-power wide area, Sigfox or LoRaWAN solutions. But we believe we can offer the best of both worlds, if you want. On one side, the advantages of low-power wide area in terms of wide coverage, low battery consumption, simplicity of the module, and relatively low economic cost of the module. On the other side, the advantages of doing this service on top of cellular networks, which means greater security, a global network that is already deployed, and it is harmonized, and can take account of the roaming agreements that already exist across our operators, and ultimately a scalability, so the simplicity of deployment. So it is a very strong proposition, and in fact, it got significant market traction. It started off in 2016, and many operators have already launched services in this. I've got a slide that shows better what is the geographic deployment of this. What is specifically for? Mainly for applications such as utilities, logistics, industrial, smart cities, simple devices that are obviously staying outdoor and then transferring relatively low amount of data, and are doing so in systems that can be used, that usually are outdoor, so mobility, but the system itself is thought to be relatively static, so there is not a continuous movement. So agriculture and environment, consumer, smart building, etc. As I was saying, significant market traction. As of today, after 3GPP standardized let's say set the specification in mid-2016, we count over 40, in fact 48 commercial deployment of these technologies around the world. We are working obviously with our members in Latin America, so that gap will be filled this year. So we are counting over 50 operators around the world already deploying the technologies, over 90 modules already existing from 30 vendors, and a significant number of open labs, 35 around the world, where our members can already test and deploy the services before they launch it commercially. So there is an entire ecosystem that is actually developing very fast, and is an extreme success. In this slide, we are also representing whether the chosen technology is LTE-M or NB-IoT. You can see from the colors that LTE-M has got more of a traction in the US, whereas NB-IoT more in Europe and Asia Pacific. There are some regions that have deployed both. One point on 5G, because I thought this was really important. We see mobile IoT, so these two technologies, NB-IoT and LTE-M, as one rung of the ladder that leads from 4G to 5G, so a step towards that evolution. If you think 5G in the way it's being defined, there is a classic triangle. So massive IoT, critical communications, and enhanced mobile broadband. This is the most typical definition of it. Mobile IoT can address, indeed, the massive IoT opportunities, smart cities, smart logistics, and smart metering, as we said. And 3GPP will ensure that the specifications of these technologies will exist within the 5G specification. So I think the key point here is that IoT can be deployed now. 5G is a new evolution of the technology. IoT is a set of applications. We need to focus on what we can offer now, particularly on the massive IoT front. And there is a guarantee that if you invest now, if you act now, the technology will be compatible with whatever definitions 5G will implement, 3GPP will implement for 5G. And then I'm moving on to security. So the last part of my presentation, a couple of slides more. Security is the single most important factor of adoption for IoT for consumer and small medium enterprises. Ask any analyst in the region or in the area and they will confirm this data. It's all about ensuring that a simple device, which has usually from a technology perspective low complexity, that has got low power, because it's usually battery operated, has got a long life cycle imagine a smart parking device that is implanted on the floor of the street and is due to stay there for 10 years. So low battery power, and also it's got to be, it is physically accessible. So consider all these characteristics, and you have to ensure that fundamentally the device is 24/7 available, connected to the network. It can be identified with authentication mechanisms. The privacy of the data that it exchanged is protected, and that the device is, the integrity is maintained. So fundamentally, it's not a trivial challenge. And I would add that from a consumer perspective, sometimes you don't have the incentive to buy a secure product, maybe because you are planning it for a non-secure activity, but one weak point on the network creates basically a negative externality for the others. So basically it can be a single point of entry where the hacker will get into and will get into important system. So that's basically the reason why as GSMA we have decided to intervene in this space. And we have done so by capitalizing on our experience. We believe and we pride ourselves that our system, the SIM system, is probably one of the safest technologies that we have nowadays. It guarantees security for our customers for the last 20, 25 years with relatively low problems. And we want to make sure that this expertise is transferred just beyond the connectivity. It's not just about securing the connectivity, it's guaranteeing the security end-to-end for the IoT service. So, and we use these also in front of policymakers and regulators, because it may be that in some cases policies can deter innovation by overestimating the risk that security can pose. We want to make sure that when government intervenes in this space, they do so with an industry-led approach, a rational approach, and a flexible one, because there are many differences between IoT services. There are some that are highly critical and some that aren't. And obviously, the security attached to these services needs to be proportional to the risk that they pose. So we have deployed and we have prepared a number of guidelines that are available on our websites in many different languages. Unfortunately, I cannot see Portuguese. The principles and the guidelines for the three big blocks, so the service provider, the endpoints, so basically the devices, and the network operators. Finally, a checklist that will help the implementation. We are really focusing on this task to make sure that the industry-wide uses these guidelines, and where possible, a policymaker will use it as a reference to inform their policy. And I'm sorry for having gone a bit beyond the time, but I would like to thank you very much for your attention.